Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. This is Dan Turchin, host of AI and the Future of Work, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. Now, we've met many ambitious entrepreneurs solving problems with AI and machine learning, but we haven't met anyone with as bold a vision as today's guest. Superhuman solving, we'll call it the email problem. Canva and Figma are solving the graphic design problem. Clubhouse is solving the live audio problem. To say Timeless is solving the calendar problem is an understatement. Wang is out to fix time, how we measure it, how we assign a value to it, and how we use what little of it we have more efficiently. Look, if he fixes your mobile calendar in the process, it's a fringe benefit. Z's manifesto on time is a must read. It's thought-provoking and required me to open my linear algebra textbook for the first time in about 30 years. We'll link to it in the show notes. Suffice it to say, Z's a big thinker and an example of what great entrepreneurs can do with small teams and just a restless need to change the world. Z spent about 8 years at Google. Before founding Timeless, he served in a variety of product roles, learning from the best. Today, we get an opportunity to learn how disruptive products are born and built from someone on the front lines of disruption. Without further ado, Z, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Why don't you share a little bit about your background and the founding vision for Timeless?
Thank you, Dan, for hosting, and certainly very excited and very grateful to connect with your audience and share the overall company vision behind Timeless. And a little over a year of our work in terms of what we have been developing, and also just really getting your audience to really hopefully one day give us a chance to try the product that we're developing. So Dan, my name is Z. I think really humbled by your introduction. I've been working in the technology space for about 15 years now. Like you said, mostly in the areas of consumer technology platforms such as Chrome, the browser, and then also, probably one of the proudest moments was basically working on arguably the largest mobile platform out there in the world, which is on Android. And then through that process, really setting out charting a course with my own startup, when I left Google in 2015 to develop a next generation platform to really solve a human problem, right? And I largely define it as how do we actuate the value of time? In a small way, in a big way, in a meaningful way, in a philosophical way. And then the idea, really the genesis of Timeless and why we think is important to actuate the value of time is one, in the truest sense, I think we always talk about time is the only scarce, commodity that we have. It is non-renewable. And, certainly in the modern age, we always say about, time is money. So that a line of thinking, the discussion we always have on a regular basis, at least in my circle, among my friends, among my family members. But the putting this larger idea, this very abstract concept of what is the value of time, into something that's really doable in a context of a startup, that really started in 2018 when I. After I sold my first startup, was called Quantum Bakery in the world of IoT. I took about 3 months off to really charting the next step of my life, and it was that time I was visiting Paris with my wife for 15 years. We're just traveling and just thinking about, okay, well, what is the the most meaningful thing I can do for the next 10, 20, 30 years going forward? And it happened to be I was visiting, one of the local museum, the Orsay Museum. There, just a train station had a giant clock, and my wife and I just took a picture in front of this clock, and just came out as a beautiful silhouette. And it was basically us, the two of us, hugging in front of this, the arguably one of the most marvelous modern day technology, the clock. And that, and as I was going home in the local Airbnb processing that photo, I was like, oh, we should really embrace humanity before technology, but in the context, how do we actually manage our time so we can actually really spend more time doing things that are bringing more joy. So that really some beginning the inkling. Well, I knew I would work on time, and I knew it was always going to be in the context of time management. And So I spent about, close to, 5 months just writing this like kind of really esoteric, kind of like really, like a lot of just bringing back a lot of the technical understanding that I gathered for about 10 years was a couple of close friends of mine from 2018 to all the way to, the first, several months of 2019. And Dan, this is what you refer to as the technical paper that we published. And also just a little shout out to, nearly, I think it's by my last count, over 3,000 people have visited that document, and I'm sure you'll share it in the show notes. And we got a lot of feedback, and it's always going to be a working draft, that document. So to your audience, welcome any critique, any criticism, or any suggestion to how to improve our way of thinking. But that's also really the spark of the beginning journey, what I consider like the starting point of Timeless as a company to build a product to actuate the value of time. So if I were to summarize, and I'm going to take a momentary pause to kind of really summarize why this abstract philosophical thinking from 2018 to actuate the value of time is relevant to building a calendar. That's the first step I'll kind of mention. So in 2019, as I was kind of thinking about building Timeless, one of the realization, and this is probably very useful to your audience as well, as that calendar, in my opinion, and based on my professional experience, is probably one of the most underutilized ecosystem. And I use that word very carefully. It is an interoperable ecosystem, meaning the calendar user, a Google Calendar user, can seamlessly schedule a meeting with a Microsoft employee, and that Microsoft employee can invite an Apple employee, because the underlying technology, the protocol, the CalDAP protocol, and also the iCalendar protocol is actually interoperable. Now, as a technologist, it's always exciting because, as we all know, we have wonderful worlds of blue bubble versus green bubble. Not everything always work out seamlessly interoperable, but calendar happened to be the exception to that rule. It's beautifully orchestrated. Even though there is still a lot of like complex, APIs and hidden, little features here and there, but by and large, they all interoperate. So that was really my professional insight while I was working at Google. Another kind of really interesting insights I gathered was in 2012 when I was working on Google Now, which was a precursor to Google Assistant. For those of you who don't understand what Google Now is, it is a virtual assistant that takes the information from Gmail, Google Search, Google Maps, and also your calendar, and basically synthesize all of that information into a graph. They combine that, called Google's knowledge graph. And basically what it does is that Google Now will proactively give you information. For example, it knows that you booked a flight from San Francisco to New York. So that morning it will tell you, hey, traffic from your home to the city is actually really bad, or to the airport is really bad. You may need to leave 30 minutes early. So from that launch experience and how well that product actually was received by the general public, I knew there was something special about building a large scale graph based on time. And that's also what led to this, in our paper for the audience, that we propose a new kind of a concept called time graph, which is a derivative of Google's knowledge graph. And Google Knowledge Graph, again, just a little side note, is really how Google is able to give you a very clear and concise answer whenever you do a Google search. For example, when you search for Taj Mahal, it knows you're potentially looking for Taj Mahal in India versus Taj Mahal, the casino in New Jersey, based on your past search patterns and where you are in the world. So imagine a better time management tool, the Timeless system that can actually give you a contextually relevant calendar information based on who you are on any given moment in time and space. Hence the reason why we think this is very exciting to embark on this journey, to develop this kind of a larger network of time graph.
New manifesto, you make the comment, the scarcity of time gives it value. That sums up a lot of what's in that document, but maybe unpack that, share more about how that relates to your broader philosophy and the founding of Timeless that you just shared.
Yeah, this is probably a very, very deep, kind of a meaningful topic, and I'll largely break down these kind of various different vectors. I think number one is basically the nature of what we're doing is that I think we as a species, we tend to value things that are scarce. I mean, we talked about this all the time, right? And it doesn't get more scarce than that. Like this is the concept of time it by definition is scarce. Everyone is very egalitarian. Everyone get 24 hours in a day. But I think what's really most fascinating is a lot of the things that we schedule on our calendar or the events we consume in our life, um, concurrency is actually very difficult to accomplish. Like multitasking is not very easy to do. I know Dan, you're in the world of future work. There has been numerous study that says multitasking is actually not the best way to accomplish top results, right? And so we know time is scarce, and we know concurrency, doing multiple things simultaneously, is actually very difficult. So I know there is a problem statement deep front and center that we can address. How do we actually solve, what's the most important thing for you to tackle on any given day? And I think that's a fundamentally always a fascinating problem. It's true today. It will be true 20 years from now. So we know this problem won't go away, and we can continue to get better and better and better. And by nature, I love those type of problems. I mean, there is not a kind of a canonical answer, but there's always approaching the limit, almost like in the calculus where as x approaches infinity, you're basically getting closer and closer, but we would never get there. And I love that. And I think in a kind of from a popular culture perspective, and I think this is a very second way I think about scarcity, which is in a world of abundance, meaning when there's a lot of things going on any given day, there's probably thousands of different decisions that you can make or events that you can participate in. What is the best way to quickly triage and narrow down the different things you can do? So the ability to kind of quickly curate or reduce, simplify, that to me is the ultimate form of product. As a product designer, that's the ultimate form of sophistication. And I think many of your audience will probably agree with this, right? We've all heard these common vernacular, like less is more, right? Or the famous Michelangelo quote, which is like, the statues are always there. I just chip away the unessential parts, right? Or, the famous saying, perfection is achieved when there's nothing more you can remove. And that's also why Timeless, like we even choose the logo, it's called T minus. The idea is not just a T minus, a countdown, but it's a reductionist way of saying, let's move the unessential things in your life so you can focus on what matters. And then, in terms of like the marketing and branding, I also did quite a lot of design work at Google, which is, it's also kind of an anthem, a rebellious take on the world of plus, meaning in a world of like, embarrassingly to say, Google Plus or Apple TV Plus or Visa Plus, Nike Plus, everyone's want to add more and more plus. I think we're taking a very kind of a philosophical stance saying, hey, the best time management tool, the best ecosystem we can develop is about removing as opposed to adding noise into your life. And again, that's a very deep philosophical way of thinking about product design and product development.
We talked about adding the concept of a marketplace to Timeless. Will there ever be an opportunity to buy, sell, exchange time like you might a stock or a Beanie Baby?
Probably not in that the kind of the surface level, but in a more deep fundamental way. I think the answer is categorically yes. Meaning, if you think about it, we're kind of in the 21st century economy is all about services, right? It's we had about 50 years transitioning from kind of the post-industrial information age to the service-oriented economy, and much of what we do on a daily basis is consumed as a form of events and services. So I think the most exciting part, and this is the part like is really more about the timeless business, where I think that the ultimate end goal, the most sophisticated calendar system that we can develop is this idea that you can actually not only just schedule 30 minutes or 60-minute business meetings, but really to say, you know what, how do I schedule things that actually bring me joy in my life? You could be scheduling a workout with your coworkers, or you could be scheduling something that, for example, your anniversary is coming up. Why can you not just schedule that directly in your calendar? Maybe book all the relevant events. Let's say you want to do a dinner and then a really nice, Broadway show together with your significant other. That would be fantastic. And then there's, all the nitty gritty, the necessity of life, right? If you need a babysitter for that event, then you can just directly schedule that and pay for it directly in your calendar. That's the most fascinating aspect about how do we radically reimagine the capability of this tool we call calendar and redefining what it is for the next 20, 30, 50 years down the road. And that's what our team's been actively working on for the past, year. And we're very excited to get ever so close to launching that particular killer feature, the marketplace on top of the calendar network.
Philosophy is so profound, and yet the pragmatic side of me says, is my calendar experience fundamentally broken enough that there's room for timeless? So challenge me on that. So why will all of the traditional approaches to time management, productivity management, task management, where's the gap that they leave that timeless will fill?
Yeah. So I don't want to call out the calendar industry as a whole is broken, because it's doing what it's supposed to do. It was designed as a kind of the alt is human efficiency optimization machine, right? Very, if you look at the interface, the user interface, very much designed like a Gantt chart. It's a busy, kind of color block to make sure that you're not running late to your meeting, you don't run over your meetings, right? You coordinate, efficiently with your people you want to coordinate with. But I think the next stage for us is really more about, okay, well, if that's all that we can use our time for these busy meetings and busy to do, then what is the point of existence, right? So are we not just going to be burning out? Are we not just going to kind of run in this infinite wheel of productivity? So for us, it's really more about, it's not broken. And I'll use a metaphor here to really connect the thought here. It's not like, for example, you can use a lens to look across the ocean that becomes the telescope. Like if you point towards the sky, you see something much, much greater and more vast. So the aperture of the lens, if you look in a different direction, even though it's just 1 degree different, what you discover is fundamentally different. And I think the way we think about the calendar is, yes, it is amazing for work meetings, but wouldn't it be even more amazing as a way to operate all the things that you can do in your life outside of work? And the fundamental problem that we're addressing, and we probably talked to close to 2,000 potential users during our beta program, is that majority of them, we're talking about like 70% of them have said they experience some form of burnout, and the calendar only adds anxiety and stress to their life. And I think we're really fundamentally going to tackle that head on as we develop the marketplace. So you can actually discover life enriching experiences and services directly within a calendar.
You and I both talk about ambient intelligence, but I think we might have different associations with that term. What do you see as kind of a world of work that is infused with intelligence that's ambient? What's that mean to you?
Yeah. And I'll kind of answer in these two different ways, right? To me, ambient is really something that's non-obtrusive, right? And in a world of like computing, like IoT computing is something that seamlessly blends into the background. And I think we're getting closer and closer. Where Walt Mossberg in his farewell address, when he left, the Wall Street Journal, he said the world of computing in the 21st century is actually disappearing, because he came from the world of PC and Macintosh and iPhone. And I think what we have witnessed in the past 5+ years was the advent of Echo and Google Assistant, is that the physical device is disappearing and becoming more and more in the background. So that's, to me, one form of ambient. Another form of ambient, and Dan, to connect your world with your audience, is basically the delineation between work and life. That's very, very much quickly disappearing, meaning that boundary is disappearing. So it needs work and life, that seamless blending of the two needs to become more passive, more ambient, and it's less about this constant back and forth balancing, but more harmoniously fitting together in a very seamless way. And how we're thinking about from a product development perspective is, you should be able to schedule let's say a 2.5-hour workout session in the middle of like Wednesday afternoon, let's say, from 2 to 4, because guess what? You might have to work long hours over the weekend, right? And this concept was very foreign and very strange prior to the modern day workforce, where the time is actually no longer this cookie cutter 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, right? This is very much true, especially if anything, that's also one of the kind of the interesting observation about COVID. It turns out you can actually be very effective based on your own schedule. And that to me is the future work. And that's also how technology can seamlessly be more proactively blend into your schedule. So you don't have to fit the schedule of the technology or the kind of traditional sense, what is work work time was personal time.
For intelligence to be ambient requires the collection of massive amounts of personal data. The flip side of the benefits that we'll get when something like Timeless is successful is that a very few number of kind of the data haves will have a monopoly over our personal data. What are your thoughts on the implications of so few providers in control of so much data that could potentially be used in such harmful ways?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I honestly, this idea of privacy, to be very honest and very candid and somewhat vulnerable, is that, uh, like I said, I spent my 20s working at Google. So it was something that we always knew was an issue. But I think we're always, as a technologist, where we say, hey, well, no one's actually reading these search queries or your inbox or your calendar events from a human perspective. But it turns out, well, if there's a large body of people behind these machines, behind these algorithms, there is a quote unquote invasion of privacy or at least sensitivity towards it. And I think this is kind of where you have to give a lot of credit to a lot of the kind of the thought leaders in this space, especially from, this idea of that human privacy is a 21st century human right. That's a very thought provoking idea. And this is kind of where I, in our technical paper, again, draw some audience attention to that is we thought about, okay, if we're to reorchestrate this entire calendar network, what are some of the new technologies that we can implement to preserve privacy? So obviously, from a machine learning perspective, the concept of federated learning is becoming more and more prevalent. So we're actively doing research in that. Zero knowledge proof in terms of how do you actually match someone's intent, like scheduling intent, with a service provider's what they're capable of, right? So there is a kind of a zero knowledge proof mechanism that we can actually implement from a marketplace perspective. And now there's like maybe in the next 5+ years, the idea of a homomorphic encryption, where you can reveal the truth behind the data without revealing everything. I mean, it's so early stage, but we're obviously very excited. And in our paper, we wrote, hey, I know there's something there, even though it's not quite ready yet, but I know we can actuate that maybe somewhere down the line, maybe not too far into the future. And then, what's even more concrete for the next, as we're kind of getting ready to get more users onboarded, is that we do take privacy very seriously. So a lot of the way we're matching, your calendar event with a user's event, it's actually end-to-end encrypted. So we don't reveal too much, right? And to really address, the half, not, and half in terms of like data access and data privacy, I think one thing that we're very mindful is Time is never going to become an advertising company. So meaning the idea is not to open up your calendar so multiple advertisers can bid on your schedule and show you a bunch of ads. There's a reason why we said one of the insight we had is to build a marketplace on top of the calendar. So we can actually, the monetization, the business incentive is not to sell your data, but to actually help you book events and services that you initiate as a user, not because some secret advertising exchange network is actually exchanging your information for relevant ads. So I think our company's incentives very much align with the users and also with the providers. And I think this is something that we're pretty excited because I think it is a new way forward beyond the age of advertising as a fundamental revenue stream for next generation of startups.
Now, you spent some formative years at Google and did some amazing things there. Arguably, it's the most iconic technology culture. You could debate that, but certainly on a short list. Tell us some of the things that you learned at Google in terms of leadership and culture that you would like to replicate at Timeless. And then answer the other question as well, which is what are some of the things that you'd like to unlearn that happened at Google that you wouldn't want to be a part of the Timeless culture?
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about the lesson learned and also the lesson that we want to unlearn. I think number one, and this is always a cliche, but it really is about the people. Like there was something magical, especially in the early years, the first 10, 15 years of the years at Google. It really felt it was not just a like-minded people, but was really a collection of people that there is sense of intellectual naivete in terms like there was always this idea that if we can actually just collectively work together and work hard and really observe the problem, we can truly solve some real interesting problem. So it wasn't like the parody of like, Silicon Valley where it's like, oh, like we can make the world a better place. There was that genuine kind of interest to build using technology to build a better solution for the larger world. And obviously, in the first, 10, 15 years of the company, not everything Google did was, right in terms of like we didn't solve all the problems, but that truly was a people first approach, putting the best mind together, working something and trying to really solve it from a very practical way, but also very driven in a way that's also very ambitious. So I truly love Google for that. And I think that part of the DNA is still very much alive within Google. And then I think the thing that is really to unlearn from Google, this is a really good question. I thought about this quite a lot. I think the realizing there's not one lens to see the world. And I think this is not to be apologetic about the collection of people who work at the company or currently working at a company, or because there is a bit of a filter in terms of who joined the company in early years. So the collection of lenses where we see the world, the aperture, the focal length that we see the world, they tend to converge in a singular direction at times. And in my opinion, I think you do need more diverse perspective, right? Um, and I remember like, the silly joke about, back in the days, you have to submit your SAT score. And I think that was really one of these small little telltale signs that was almost too singular focus on one way thinking. And I think as a startup now, especially in the past, year or so, the way we hire people, the way we interact with the general community is always about, hey, you know what? There's almost, you know, we're 7 billion people on this planet and we're marching towards 10 billion people. There's so many different ways to look at the world. And you have to be always open-minded because the future is not going to be built based on one singular vision. If anything, when you have this kind of a symphonic orchestration of every different ideas, every different perspective coming together and hopefully coming out with different set of solutions and different set of ideas for all people from all walks of life.
See, time flew by, so to speak. And unfortunately, I've only had time for one last question, but I got to get this one in. I want your perspective on it. So before we started recording, you were talking about your mom in Atlanta and how you introduced her to the Chrome browser, and you kind of just got a twinkle in your eye. Like I could tell that's kind of, really you're passionate about taking technology and applying it in these consumer contexts. When Timeless is just kind of wildly successful, how's it going to change your mom's life?
Yeah, I think this is also just kind of this eternal motivation within me, right? As a son of an immigrant, like, I know the sacrifice she made. And I think this is true for a lot of, second generation immigrants. And, this story is not unique to me, but my way of kind of stay relevant to my mom's generation is really based on the work I do, right? Because, I mean, you can write all the kind of, technical papers and this high level philosophical ideas. When it's all said and done, when you talk to your mom, your dad, or your siblings, what they care about is like something that's true and real, meaningful to them. And for me, it was really the early observation was that it's not about the software code; it's what I can meaningfully show my mom. And some of the things that I demonstrated, when I was working at Google, is that I remember every holiday season I come back for Christmas to Atlanta. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and showing her Chrome browser or just giving her, hey, mom, this is the phone that I worked on this past year. And then, being typical of people of her generation, she didn't say much. Oh, like this is cool, right? But then you start seeing how she shows off to the neighbors, right? And whenever at the family gathering, she will walk around and just tell people what she worked on. That just made my day. That's more so than like, oh, some high level, thinking about the technology, how this is better than iPhone or how the Chrome browser is actually faster than Firefox. She doesn't care any of that stuff. And that's my way of connecting back to what I do on a daily basis to the people that truly matters in my life, which is, happen to be my family, my friends, and my coworkers, right? And I think that's a constant reminder that you really do have to embrace humanity before technology in big way and a small way.
Well, Z's mom in Atlanta, I hope you're listening to this, and I'm sure you're very proud that your boy's out changing the world and helping us all be better humans with some amazing technology. Um, Z, this was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation, and maybe if you don't mind, we'll have you back on a future episode because you're gonna be talking about a lot of exciting stuff in the months and years ahead.
Of course, Dan. This has been a pleasure. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for hosting.
This is Dan Turchin, your host of AI and the Future of Work. Really enjoyed that discussion, Z. Thanks again for coming on. We are back next week with another fascinating guest.